Everything in life is a choice. There are times when you stand up for what you believe because you feel strong or you're capable of doing it, and there are times when you just give in, and the fight isn't worth it. I often say to my accountant, who's always fighting the IRS about everything, and I always tell him, I am not the kind of a person who's willing to spend $100 to save 50 to prove that I am right. If you're going to bill me $100 to save me 50, I'll just soon send the 50 in and call it even, all right? You have to understand that when you don't stand up for your principles or for what you want to do or what you believe, that's a choice too. Here's an example. Visiting relatives, a problem for most people. When I would arrive, because I live out of town, I live several thousand miles away from my hometown and my wife's hometown, visiting relatives becomes something that you end up doing, right? And a lot of times you would rather not do that. And you feel oftentimes abused, or you got to go on an afternoon when you'd rather just be watching a football game or going out and playing with your kids or just going for a walk or being alone or any number of things, all right? Or just taking a nap. But instead you find yourself on your way to visit Uncle Harry or Aunt Sally or somebody that you really aren't crazy about seeing. I used to feel that this was just a part of life's victim game, that once in a while you have to be a victim. Or I used to think of it as a compromise, all right? That you sometimes have to compromise, and you hear that. You sometimes have to compromise. I don't think you ever have to compromise. I think that everything you do in life is a choice. And when I go to visit a relative, because let's say my wife would like me to go with her to visit her aunts and uncles or her parents or whatever it may be, and I would rather do something else, I'm not compromising by going. I know that it makes my wife feel terrific to have me go with her to these places. And the result is that I have made a choice for my wife to feel terrific by going there with me. And that's a better choice than having her feel alienated by not going. I've still made the choice. I've made the choice, and the result that I get from it is that my wife appreciates it and feels good because I do that. So it must make me feel better as a human being to please my wife than it does to just simply please myself. So I'm still pleasing myself, all right? And it's not a compromise in that sense. Now, once you make the decision to go, then you can do it with gusto. You can do it with fun, and you've made the decision now that you're going to go. And the reason that you're making it is still an internal choice that you have. You're not a victim. Your priorities are now established. You would rather have your wife feel good than stay home and be by yourself or whatever you were going to do. Obviously, that's why you're going, all right? So now you know why you're going, all right? And it has to do with your own motivation. Now you're going. Now you can go with a lot of misery and look forward to, you can say to yourself things like, well, we're only staying 20 minutes because we're going to have a lousy time. Every time we go to Uncle Harry's, it's always lousy, and he's going to be all upset, and he'll probably be drunk, and I'm going to have a terrible time. And you can set your mind with all of this poisonous kind of stuff that is destined to make the experience really one of you being a victim and feeling rotten. Or you can say, you know, I'm going to have a terrific time. I'm going to talk to Harry. I'm going to be there for whatever amount of time that I choose to be there. I mean, many people will go to a party with the expectation that they have to leave in a half hour because they're going to be having a lousy time. And they've already got it planned. Okay, we'll have a lousy time for half an hour, then we'll leave, all right? And they spend their life having lousy times, instead of going with the expectation that I can have a great time. I'm open to it all. It can be a terrific experience for myself. And so the second thing that you do is once you've made your decision to go, you make a decision to make it a miracle, to make it a wonderful time, to make it an experience that is not one that's going to victimize you. And the only way to do that is through your thinking. And when you look for nice things and you expect it to be nice, you suddenly see things in Harry that you never saw before. Suddenly Aunt Sally really isn't such a bad person, or she's really interesting, or she's got a great story to tell. Everybody's got a great story to tell. And all you have to do is stop being so concerned with having a miserable time and at least allow yourself to be neutral or positive, which is always better. And before long, you walk away and you're laughing and you're having a good time. And you might have spent 2 or 3 hours and you walk away from those kind of experiences. I do very often thinking, you know, they really are nice people. They really do have a lot to offer. It's really interesting to assess, you know, life in this manner. I find that everybody I meet is a novel. Every human being, I look at it that way. And I even say, when I sit down in a plane next to a stranger, I will often say to them, I wonder why we're sitting next to each other on this plane. And they'll look at me like, oh boy, have I got a weirdo with me. But by the time it's over, by the time the flight is over, very often we know why. Sometimes I say nothing, but many times I feel that everybody out there has their own novel in them. So wherever you're going in life, as long as there's going to be people there, unless you're going to solitary confinement, and then you got to learn that the cockroaches have a novel too, if that's where you're going to be. But if you're going to any place where there are going to be people, and you're open to just letting them pour out their story, people will do it. And life, instead of being this ugly, dull, victimized kind of experience, becomes this miraculous adventure, which is always terrific. And it's always an attitude. It's always an attitude.
On the whole quality of complaining and whining, neurotics complain. Neurotics whine. Neurotics find fault. They don't like the way things are going. Things are always so bad. Things are never going to get any better. I just know that. They find fault almost everywhere you go. You ever get around people like that who are always finding fault with everything? And then there are people over here who kind of accept the world the way it is, but they really don't feel like they're active doers about it. And over here, you see, I think there are critics and complainers, and there are people who accept things, and then there are no-limit people. These are doers. Doers at the highest level. They know that if anything is going to get changed in life, including themselves, that they can't sit around and complain about it to make it happen. And so they practice. And so you can practice. The things you don't like, complaining, fault-finding, blaming, wishing, hoping, they're all the tools that neurotics use. Whereas highly functioning, no-limit people are those who don't have time for the complaints. They have almost like an inner sense of their own destiny, an inner sense of their own mission. And they know they've only got so much time. We have a limited amount of time here. And the amount of time that I'm given is a blessing. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. To me, as Whitman said, every cubic inch of space is a miracle. And anything I don't like, I want to spend my time correcting, changing, making this a better place for myself, for those who are going to follow me here on this planet, for my loved ones. And all of this stuff, you'll find that Nez people kind of just leave when they hear complaining, when they hear people wallowing around, or what I call drapery talk. You ever get into drapery talk? Where people sit around and talk about the drapes, and what color they are and how it goes with this and goes with that. You'll find these people over here, all of a sudden they're in the bathroom. What the hell is he doing in the bathroom now? And I'm just getting to the good stuff, to the drapes, They don't want to hear about that. They're not interested in it. They're more concerned with trying to right the things. In fact, Maslow talked about this quality. He said that when you're around a person like this, who has no limits on where he can go or she can go, and there's no sexual difference here, men and women can share it equally. When you're around a person like that, you're suddenly aware, no matter where you are, of being around a very, very special person. You're a school teacher. There's usually in the school one teacher, maybe two, that the kids kind of gravitate toward, that kids want to be around. For some reason, they know that this person isn't going to judge them, this isn't the easy teacher. This isn't the teacher who's trying to make friends by having all the kids on her side or his side. This is the person wherever they go. If they're in a school and it's half black and half white, and there's conflicts there racially, that the black kids know that they can go to this person. Whether the person is white or black, it doesn't matter. And the white kids know that too. And some of the kids who live far away, and some of the rich kids, and the bright kids, and the truant kids, and they all tend to want to be around this very special human being who has these unique qualities of almost being metaphysical, almost being beyond, or having what I think of as transcended normal, gone beyond that. And you know when you're around a human being like that you can't get enough of them. That no matter what they say or what they're doing or whatever, and whatever faults they may have or how much you may dislike what they're saying or thinking or doing, that they're inspiring, that they're motivational, that they're exciting, that there's a sense of rubbing off of them. Maslow described some of them. Jesus Christ as a person who was like that, as a human being that had a kind of a charisma that other people were attracted to. And not just religious leaders, but people, poets and musicians and even some of the leaders of our times. He described Eleanor Roosevelt as a human being that other people seem to always want to gravitate toward rather than someone else. That there are a few of these people where I part with him dramatically, of course, is in the belief that only a few people can have it. That special quality is there, and it's mostly there because of the things I've been talking about tonight. Because people are willing to do what I've been talking about for the last several hours. They're willing to take the risks. They're willing to consult inside. They're willing to suffer those slings and arrows, and they're not intimidated by anybody else's opinions. Do you know that neurotic people often feel unloved, unappreciated? They feel like other people don't understand them a lot. Someone once asked me, what is the greatest quality of life? That on a television show, what do you think is the greatest quality of life that a human being can have? And you know, I thought about it. My conclusion was that the ability to enjoy life every day is the greatest quality you can have. Just the ability to enjoy life. Because if you can't enjoy your life, then you are a burden to somebody. To somebody, you're a burden. Usually to a lot of people. And the more burdensome you are to other people, the less you are in that no-limit quality that I'm sharing. This person feels unloved. This person over here doesn't even think about those qualities of being loved or unloved, just kind of goes through their life neutral. This person knows that they're loved and knows also that the people who find fault with him or with her are just that. They're just people who are different. They don't have a need to try to get everybody to like them for everything that they do all the time. They're not into that approval-seeking, whining, I've got to get everybody to like me, and so they become people pleasers. If there's anything you can learn about being no limit, it means to understand that you can never, ever get everybody to like you all the time. When my little girl was 3 years old, we were living out in New York, and would come home to me, this little twerp, and say, Billy doesn't like me. Billy doesn't like me. He's doing this, he was doing that, which all kids do. And I would say, do you like you? Rather than saying, let's see what we can do to get Billy to like you, let's see what, do you like yourself? Well, of course I like myself. Well, what difference does it make what Billy thinks? As long as you feel good about you. And she was used to hearing me talk crazy like that. You know, she'd go back on and she would accept that. Versus what I want her to learn just as a little child and grow up with the idea, you just can't get everybody to like you all the time. But you can still feel loved wherever you go, especially if you feel that for yourself. And I think one of the qualities that isolates in this whole paradigm that I'm drawing up here tonight is that a people pleaser is someone who has an opinion for everyone, okay? And this is a big, big sickness. That is, they say something about what they believe. I believe in, and you name it. I believe in abortion, I believe in prostitution, I believe in drugs, I believe in anything that may be controversial. I believe that capital punishment is good, bad, or whatever, and they will say that. Okay? And then they will hear someone else come back and say, what do you mean you believe in abortion? How can you possibly... Well, I don't mean exactly that I believe in abortion. I believe... Yeah. And suddenly you see them shifting, because what is going on here is that their self-image, their self-esteem, is not based upon what they feel about themselves. It's based upon how other people react to them. And if somebody else is negative, whether it's a husband, a wife, whether it's your children, whatever, and someone says something that you disagree with, and you find yourself shifting in order to get them to like you, the more you do that, the more you find that you are a people pleaser, having an opinion for everyone, and of course your self-image is not locked on the self, it's locked in on other people. As I talk about all of these qualities, and I've only gone through 8 or 9, and there are many, many more, and I don't want to spend the next 3 weeks here in Detroit talking about them. When I think about what it is, what are these things that make the difference? And even as I think out loud here right now, it occurs to me that if you, as you listen right now, choose to believe that you have the potential for being a no-limit human being, that's it. You have isolated the quality that I'm talking about. If you choose anything else, that is to believe from the whole notion of what other people think of you, to trying to get along with the world, to trying to please everybody, whatever that may be, to being the right person, to doing all the things that I talked about in the big chunk of your life, following all of those rules, if you choose to believe that, then all you'll do is convince yourself that you're right and I'm wrong. And what I would say to that is, instead of biting off my finger, what you ought to do is look to where it's pointing. Just ask yourself to what extent you want to change the things in your life about yourself that you don't like. Just ask yourself that. And if any of those come up in a positive way that you would like to change, then you can have it.
I don't think of things as faults, what is missing in your life, because I don't think anything is missing. I think everything that you are is what you've chosen to be up until now. And you may be chronically late, for example, or you may be somebody who wastefully spends their money, maybe someone with a bad temper, and you might label these things as faults. On the other hand, if you do, then you're operating from this premise that where I am is somehow deficient, and I got to repair these deficiencies, which I just talked about. And it's much more effective to look at yourself as, how can I grow in these dimensions? This is what I am, this is what I do. I don't like this about myself. Rather than labeling it as a deficiency, labeling it as the choices that I've made up until now. And I think I'll work on new choices. You see, anything you have in life you can state in positive or negative terms. Negative is a fault. Positive is just growth. We were in Hawaii, and I saw one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. It was a store, a little gift shop, and outside they had a sign. And the sign said, "Please enjoy your food and drinks outside the store." In other words, it didn't say, "No, you can't come in the store, and how dare you, if you come in, we'll arrest you, and no food in the store," and all of that. It stated in a positive way what it was that they wanted and what their policy was. You hear people talking about a war on drugs. You know, as soon as you have a war, you have to choose up sides, and you have to have a winner and a loser, and you have to have armaments, and the drugs will continue to go on as long as there's a war. If we could phrase it in a positive way, let's focus on raising a drug-free culture. How many people out there are against terrorism? I mean, who isn't against terrorism? We're all against terrorism, but that's one of the reasons we continue to have terrorists and we continue to have war in the world, because so many people are against it. If everybody who was against terrorism would phrase it in terms of, "I'm for peace," and devote their whole life or their energy, the same energy that they devote against terrorism, for peace, and work for peace. And imagine thousands and millions of people working for peace instead of against terrorism, we would have a peaceful world. I mean, if you look at the statistics, for every dollar we spend on peace, we spend $2,000 on war. And that's why we have guns and ammunition and bombs and nuclear weapons and all of the things that could destroy us, because we're always focused on what we're against instead of what we're for. So the areas that you can grow in your life, look at them. I would like to be less dogmatic in my relationship with my wife. Instead of putting it into a negative, say, I am going to work on being a more pleasant person. I'm going to work on that. I am going to work at arriving on time. instead of berating myself for being tardy and late all the time. I am going to spend more time working on this particular project that I'm involved in, writing this book or whatever it may be. I am going to devote more time to my children instead of I don't spend enough time with them. In other words, you state it in a positive way. And then you don't have to think of yourself as flawed. It's a perfect universe. It's a perfect world. It all works on harmony. It's all presented to us as this perfect system. Each one of us is a part of the perfection of it. The universe doesn't make any mistakes. See yourself that way, and then see yourself as making new and growth-producing choices rather than repairing faults and deficiencies. And you'll see yourself growing and growing and growing, and the things that used to immobilize you and depress you and get you upset and that you used to call faults, or you used to call flaws, no longer are seen that way. They're just seen as choices that you made along the way. Change is part of the paradox that I've been talking about all along here. Everything is changing and nothing is changing at the same time. Everything is and everything isn't at the same time. Change. When you see that the universe and all of us in it are constantly evolving, but still within the confines of what the universe is. I look at it like this. I tell people, look at a picture on your wall and stand back from it. And I'd say to you, is that picture complete? And you say, of course it's complete. It's whole, it's total, isn't it? And then you take a microscope, a huge microscope, the most powerful one you can get, and you start looking down inside the picture. And you find that in each little piece of paint, there are whole universes in there, and that have nothing to do with the universe on the other side of the painting or just across from it. And the purples and the greens and the blues, and there are little bugs in there. I mean, there are little bacteria in there, and you go a little further, and within each life form, there's more life forms and life, and you go further and further down inside it, and you see that within this completed picture, there are trillions and trillions of life forms and cells and so on, and it's endless going that direction. It's also endless going the other direction. The universe doesn't end any place, it just goes on. So we see everything from perspective. I think if we could all get back far enough and see the universe as a picture, it's already complete, all right? It's all total, it's all whole, it has to be. And yet within it, as you break it down, you see we are also free. We have a free-willed people to change and do anything we want within the completeness of the whole thing, so that you have a free will and you don't have a free will at the same time. You have change that is taking place, but you look at the picture and it's not changing at all.
I wrote out a series of questions, just a few, to close with. I just ask you about as you leave here tonight after having spent some 4 hours here with me. Let me ask you this question. If you suddenly discovered that you had 6 months to live, how would you change your life? What would you do? What would you do differently? If you really knew that 6 months from now, it was over for you, you weren't going to make it, what would you do different? And my answer to you, in terms of whatever you would do differently, would you stay in the same job? Would you stay in the same relationships? Would you stay here in Detroit? Would you get off and try other new things? What? My answer to you about that question, I've always thought it as a good question, is you only have 6 months to live. That's a good number. That's all you got. Even if you've got 30 years, or 50 years, or 90 years, it's this much time. It's this much time. That's it. They say in the end, it's a wink of an eye, as Jackson Browne said. And no matter how I try to understand it, I can't seem to grasp it, no matter how hard I try. What death is, and what it means, and where we're going. But we know that our time here is so short. You want to make a difference in the world? You want to go out and help other people? You want to end some of the real problems we have on this planet? You want to be happier? You want to try things you've never tried before? And you know that if you knew you had 6 months to live, you would do that? Then the advice I have to you is take the risk. Do it. Try it. Give it that kind of effort, because in reality, 6 months is a good amount of time to be thinking in terms of how much time you have. And the future is promised to no one. That's one thought-provoking question of what you would do. Another question. Who would you choose to live with if you could live with anyone else in the world and you had no history right now of whom you've lived with up until now? No family? No history at all. Like your life starts right this minute, okay? No parents, no children, family, whatever. Who would you choose to live with? Would you pick the people that you're in a relationship with now? Would you change some things? And then ask yourself, why aren't you surrounding yourself with the kind of people that you'd love to be with? Do you have to be trapped? Can you teach the people that you do love to be excited and happy and alive and creative and make life pleasant? Can you teach the people who are kvetchers and complainers and whiners and try to bring you down and drag you down each day? You know what I do? And I know it sounds silly, but I do it every morning. When I go to shave in the morning, I look in the mirror and I say this to myself. It's a terrific exercise. I say, nobody on this planet is going to ruin this day for you. Nobody. Nobody. Some guy's going to cut you off on the freeway. I know it. And he's getting up planning it already. I know that. I'm going to get Wayne Dyer, but he's not going to get my day. And somebody's going to talk back to me, and somebody's not going to want to do what I want, and somebody's going to scowl. And I'm telling you, this is my day. And anybody, I don't care who they are, no matter how much I love them, I'm not going to let them have this day. Once you practice that, before long you get good at being someone that you like being around, and others do too. If you're living out of a sense of obligation instead of choice, you are a slave. If you're staying with the person you've been with because you've been with them for a long time, and that's the only reason, then I feel very sorry for you. If you're doing it because you're supposed to do it, because everybody else dictates to it, that is not operating from inner signals. Relationships based on obligation lack dignity. Relationships based on choice, freedom, and love, and what I want and what you want, have all the dignity in the world. Third question. Where would you choose to live if you had no awareness of where you've lived up until now? Where would you live? Detroit? Maybe. South of France? Climate that's different? I'm talking now, you don't know where you've lived up until now. And you look on that big globe that we call our home, and you say, where would I like to be? No history of where I've been. And then ask yourself, what is it that keeps me from being there? Is it the fear? Is it the fact that I won't make it? That I'll fail? That I'll fall on my face? And then remind yourself that most fears are only that. They're only mental. They're only thought processes. That in fact, if you're making it here and doing well and feeling a sense of success, you can do that anywhere. Anywhere. And why not be where you choose to be rather than staying here because your great-grandparents landed here, as immigrants or whatever. Fourth question. How much sleep do you think you would get if you had no clock and no ability to measure time? How much sleep do you think you'd get? Think you'd get 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever it is? You think you'd spend a third of your life dead? You think you would? They've done studies on this. They put people in bunkers and taken away underground and taken away all references to time and had just kind of a dull light in there. And no meals served at any particular time or anything. And they monitored how much sleep they got. You know what it averaged out to? When people didn't know what time of the day it was, they could sleep whenever they wanted to. Didn't make any difference. They had a lot of creative materials and so on. 4.4 hours per day is what the average person got under those conditions for 90 days. Do you know that a big part of sleep is nothing more than just not knowing what to do with your life? You know? Why don't I get up earlier in the morning? What the hell am I going to do if I do get up, you know? So I'll just stay here and go to sleep and sleep some more. Or, it's 10 o'clock, I must be sleepy, you know? Running your life on calendars and so on. Fifth question. How much and when would you eat if there were no such thing as meal times? See what I'm getting at? I'm talking about running your life on inner signals. How many people eat 3 meals a day because that's what they're served or that's what they're supposed to do? Or say to themselves, well, if I don't eat now, I know I'm not hungry now, but I'll just be hungry later anyway. So I might as well gobble all of this food down. Learning to run your life on inner rather than external signals. Good question to ask yourself. And then don't put yourself on a schedule. And more than that, especially if weight is any kind of a problem, don't eat everything on your plate. In other words, put one bite of food on your plate at a time, and when you've finished eating, ask yourself, do I want any more food? And does my body demand any more food? If the answer is no, stop. You've had enough. Most people put way too much of those things in their body, particularly sugars and things that are killers. Question 6. What would you do if there was no such thing as money? There was just no such thing. What would you be doing in your life on a daily basis if there was no such thing as money? What kind of activities would you engage in? The old money makers over there. It's an interesting question. Because anything that you're doing for money that you don't like, and anything that you're interested in doing, you can also earn a living at. Anything at all in this world there's a demand for, with the 4 billion people that are on this planet. Anything. And if what you're doing because it is earning you a living, or you've got good benefits, or you've only got 13 more years until you retire, or whatever, and you're doing it for those reasons, whatever you ask yourself, I always ask people who are in that kind of a crisis, what would you really like to do? What do you like to do more than anything else? And when you answer that question, come up with it, then you can figure out a way to make that into a way to make a living. I dislike vocational counseling and vocational guidance, mostly because it tries to slot people. It says, study this, go after this, take a cooter inventory, let's see how many things you like and dislike, and then get that job and stay there for 50 years. Instead of saying, the sky's the limit. You can do anything. You can work at anything. And if you don't like this job, and you're a doctor, and you're a very prominent surgeon, and you don't want to do that anymore, stop doing that. You know, try being a sportscaster, or an artist, or a musician, or whatever it may be. And instead of doing things because you're supposed to make money at them, you ought to be doing them because they give you inner peace. Question. How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were? Satchel Paige's question. How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were? Would you be old, middle-aged, young? And then forget how old you are. Because the aging process itself, the very process of aging, is in fact a direct result of attitude and what you believe, what you think in your life. A no-limit person, I believe, can choose when to die. Even that, to that extreme. You look at some of the chronicles of Indian tribes, people who weren't ever civilized, in quotes. People who, like Jacob Marino, who was the founder of the Psychodrama Institute, and the whole notion of 97 years old, and just announced the day before, he said, living no longer is what I want for myself. Tomorrow I die. Laid down, closed his eyes, and died. That was it. And Indian chiefs used to do that very thing. That, in fact, you can live as long as you choose to live. And as fully, and in your 90s, like George Bernard Shaw and Will Durant and even Winston Churchill, people like that can still be productive and fulfilled and excited, or old, sciatica, tired, and complaining. How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were? What kind of a personality would you have if you were starting today? What kind of a personality would you have? Would you be more assertive, less assertive? Would you be more nervous, less nervous? Would you be more outgoing, more inward or introverted? Whatever it is in your personality, the kind of person that you are, how would you start if you were choosing it today? And then remind yourself that that's exactly what you do every single day. You choose your personality. And the last question, how would you describe yourself if you couldn't use any labels? If I ask you this assignment, tell me what kind of a human being you are. And I don't want to know how old you are, and I don't want to know anything about your background. I don't want to know anything about your family, what you do for a living, how much money you make. I don't know anything about your religion, how much schooling you've had. I don't want to know anything about your, like how many brothers and sisters and things like that. Not interested in that. What kind of a human being are you? How would you describe yourself? Are you a person who can even do that? Or do you use labels to describe yourself and slot yourself? Can you tell me, or anybody, what it means to be you as a human being? What you're like? Those are good questions. Good questions to ask yourself as you go out of here tonight and think about what it means to be that no-limit person. The person who is so in charge that they can trust their instincts, be childlike, be creative, do anything that makes sense to them, fly out of here, and make their lives into what they really believe they want for themselves. Boy, if we could teach the crux, the guts of what I've been presenting here tonight to young people and helping the next generation grow up so that they don't have to rely on a Valium in order to get rid of an anxiety attack which doesn't exist. Anxiety doesn't attack. If we could get those messages across, well, it's like the little boy or little girl in us. We all have it. And as I leave you, I think about, there was a guy who lived back a few centuries ago named Voltaire, who wrote a marvelous book called Candide, which is really the journey of a man and his partner looking for themselves. In the end, what is the conclusion? What's the last line in Candide? You've got to learn to cultivate your own garden. They were looking for riches everywhere, and they were trying to find, and all they ever found was frustration. And the thing that they learned is how to cultivate their own garden. And Voltaire's biographer, and Voltaire was a man who really took on kings and queens and satirized everyone. Voltaire's biographer said this of him, and I really feel it strongly enough, I would like it to be said of me. He said, first and above all else, he was marvelously alive. And mankind, who dreads boredom, even more than anxiety, is eternally grateful to those who make life throb to a swifter, stronger beat. That's for me. If I can make your life, mine, throb to a swifter, stronger beat in what I say and what I write and what I do, there's my sense of purpose. It's right there, right out in front for me. Because I think, as I look at all of the erroneous zones that are out there and all the neurotics that are out there and all the self-defeating behaviors, I think the big cosmic erroneous zone is this. And I think I've got it solved for me. There is no way to happiness. There just is no way to happiness. Happiness itself is the way. The evening is over. Thank you. Thank you very much.
What can you suggest the type of counseling for an 18-year-old girl having a problem with her person and direction in life? A lot of negative, poor self-image, and resentment.
First of all, helping somebody else achieve a sense of purpose is a part of the mission of what it means to be a parent, in my estimation. But you can't do it for them. If you've got people in your family, young people, teenagers, who are negative, the best thing I think that you can do for them is to provide them a model, an example, if you will, of somebody who isn't going to allow their behavior, their attitudes, the kinds of things that they're doing in their lives to disrupt and ruin even 1 hour of your life. You can make clear to them that you're there to help them. You can have talks with them. You can explain to them. But in the end, they will know that you mean what you're all about by what you live, rather than by what you say or what you tell them to do. So that's all out crucial. In other words, if your child comes home from school and has a D in algebra and a poor mark in citizenship in school, is that a reason for you to ruin a day of your life? First question you have to ask yourself. Whose problem is this? And why are you going to make it yours by immobilizing yourself and making yourself upset? Yes, you can do things like restrict certain kind of privileges. Certainly I don't believe in total just ignoring of somebody and letting them permissively do whatever they choose. You can help them by getting tutors for them and provide conversations with them and so on and be a helping, caring person. But what you should never do is to say to you, get yourself all worked up, get yourself miserable, and find yourself fretting and upset in your life. You have to teach them that their behavior is just that. It's their behavior. Not only do they own it, but they have to take the responsibility and the consequences for it. I always tell parents who find themselves with obstreperous kids or children who are abusive or disrespectful and so on, I talk to mothers and I'll say, what is your behavior like toward that child? I'll say, well, let's see, I make his lunches for him. Let's say you've got a child who calls you names, and then your response is, oh, well, you know, he's just finding himself or whatever, and I'll just make his lunch for him, and then I'll chauffeur him to his tennis lessons or pick him up from school. In other words, I could say to her or him, I can't force you to be respectful to me. I can't force that. I can't put words in your mouth. But what I can certainly not do is reward you for it. I am going to show you that when you want to behave that way, then you're going to have to do that in isolation away from me. And I am not going to be somebody who's going to continuously wait on you and do all of the things like. And also, by the way, I believe that children learn by doing. They don't learn by somebody else doing things for them. Any of you who have children over the ages of 8 and are still doing their laundry, you ought to be examining what it is that you're doing that for. I mean, an 8-year-old is perfectly capable of working a washing machine and a dryer. Very simple little thing. You do theirs for 8 years, they do yours for 8 years. That seems to make a lot of sense. And you alternate after the second 8 years. Like, you ask yourself, what do you owe your children? You don't owe them a slave. You don't owe them being a victim. You don't owe them having to give up and sacrifice your life. What I think you owe them, because you make a choice to bring them into the world, is being a model of a loving, caring human being who is fully functioning in her and his own life, who has a sense of meaning and mission yourself. And when your children see that in you, they will naturally come along. Where you encourage independence. You don't encourage them to be dependent on you, but you permit them to make the kind of mistakes and to fail and to all of the things that go with what it means to grow up to be a healthy person. But mostly, you don't model that you're going to reinforce. You go into a neurotic behavior. You go into a grocery store, and you're with your child, and your child says, I want a piece of bubble gum. And you say, you can't have a piece of bubble gum. And the child comes back, I want a piece of bubble gum. I told you, you're not having a piece of, I want a piece of bubble gum, I want a piece of bubble gum, you want a piece of bubble gum. And they scream and like, all right. You want a piece of bubble gum? Here, have a piece of bubble gum. Here's a penny, go to the machine. Message. if you want a piece of bubble gum, you have to be crazy. That's what you've taught your child. When my daughter and every son in the world tries that when they're little, would say to me, I want a piece of bubble gum, and I would say no, and I'd say, hold it, that's terrific. Let's get everybody over here. We're going to put on a show. I brought a gorilla with me, from the... And show them that I am not going to be intimidated, bulldozed, manipulated, victimized by your behavior. And your behavior is not going to be encouraged. If you make lunches, if you pick a child up and are the chauffeur for that child, and do all of the things again, and give them money and blah, 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 and then turn around and have them abusive towards you, and then continue this lifestyle over here, all you're doing is saying, I would like you to continue being nasty toward me, and here, let me reinforce it. I don't think you should be doing that. It's my opinion.
What is the difference between setting goals and living in the future?
Okay. I think goals are very important for all of us to have. I think having a plan is really important and significant. I don't think it's healthy to fall in love with your plan. If you can't shift gears, if you can't, let's say you're on a trip, you're going out west, and you've made reservations all along the way, to stop at a Holiday Inn or whatever, wherever you're stopping as you go along. And you get to a place that is really interesting and intriguing, where you've never been before. Maybe they're having a rodeo the next day in Amarillo or something. And you'd really like to stop and stay and see that, but you can't because your plan, your goals, your objectives are ruling you rather than you ruling your life. If you can't adjust and be flexible with the things you want for yourself, then I think that's unhealthy. Also, I think goal setting itself is healthy in the sense that you do it in the present moment. In other words, you make a goal for yourself, but you don't. I'll give you an example in my own life. On October 21st of last year, I ran my very first marathon, 26.2 miles, all right? When I started running a year or so before that, I didn't have any idea about running a marathon. What I had an idea was that I wanted to be more physically fit in my own life, and I wanted to see if I could run each day, one day at a time, whatever my body said I could do, and at whatever pace I wanted to. And I started out doing that, and that was a goal for me. Did it one day, and the next day I said, would I like to try that again, even though my shins were hurting and I was out of breath and so on? I said, yes, I'll do it one more day, all right? After 3 or 4 weeks, instead of running 1.2 or 1.5 miles, I was running 2 miles. Not because I had upgraded my goal. My body allowed itself to go faster and to go a little bit further. It was just only natural. After continuing in that process of individual daily goals for myself, which is living in the present and enjoying yourself, you have an automatic kind of upgrading of those goals for yourself. Within a year, there I was at the starting line of a race to run 26 miles, which if you'd have said a year before I could do that, I would have thought, you must be crazy to think anybody would even want to run 26 miles. And it's an attitude, by the way. I won that race, even though Bill Rogers was in it. And it's true, those guys stopped. Everything is an attitude. Bill stopped running after 2 hours and 12 minutes. I couldn't believe it. 3 hours and a half, I was still running, I said, you get out there and run for 3.5 hours, then you got something. You stop after 2 hours. Hell, anybody can do that. I figured I won it. I ran longer than anybody in that race. Just an attitude. It's what you believe. But like each goal that you have for yourself, let's say you want to lose weight. You want to quit smoking. You want to eliminate addictive behavior in your life, whatever it may be. The only way, it seems to me, that it's sensible to attack a problem like losing weight is to say to yourself, today, just today, or quitting smoking, just today can I go 24 hours, one day, or even a half a day, or even a few hours, without a cigarette, without eating sugar, or whatever it may be. Can I do that? Well, the answer, of course, anybody can go a day. That's no big deal. Well, the only way you get to live your life is in a day segment, even less than that. So you do that. Then what you are at the end of that 24-hour period, you're a new person. Now, if today you say to yourself, I'm only going to want a cigarette tomorrow anyway, who am I kidding? So I might as well have one now. Or I'm only going to want to have a hot fudge sundae tomorrow night, so why not have one tonight too? Or, geez, you mean I can never have another sundae the rest of my life? That'll drive you right to the refrigerator faster than anything, you see. You don't do that because someday you may eat hot fudge sundaes every night. I have one, very often, whenever I feel like having one. But I add a whole lot of other dimensions to my life which permit that. So it's like you take that day and you say to yourself, at the end of this day, I now have 24-hour history of no nicotine in my body. And boy, a lot of you could use that. It was really, really smoky out there. Hard for me to believe. No message, no moral message. So you take that one day. Now you're a different person. Let that person decide whether they want to go another day. Don't let the person who wants one right now. Let the person who's got 24 hours of success behind them decide. And then let the next person, the next day, now you got 48 hours behind you. Let that new person, because you're a new person every day. Anybody who's ever been in alcoholic treatment, Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's the only program that's had even a tiny bit of success, knows that their slogan, one day at a time, is the way that you handle that. You just deal with your life one day at a time. And you can have a lot of goals in this day and not be living in the future at all. But I'd be absurd to get up here and say, goals, you should never have goals for yourself. So everybody has a goal. It's how much you can do it in the present moment, I think, that counts.
If a person feels that they are overburdened with job responsibilities, should they express this feeling to their boss or just go ahead and smile?
Well, there's really only one boss in your life, and that's you. And I really mean that. I know what that world of work is like out there. I've been in it all of my life. But, the person looking back in the mirror at you is the one you have to answer to every day. And first of all, if you are in a job in which you are feeling a measure of dissatisfaction about your own self and what you are doing and whether it is fulfilling what you want for yourself, if that's true, then I would say, A, change your attitude toward what you're currently doing so that a fully functioning person, if they got sentenced to solitary confinement, would know how to make that work for themselves. That's what anybody who's ever been put under the horrible conditions like the survivors of the Nazi concentration camps, the ones who survived were able to do. They were able to take a blade of grass, just a ray of sunlight, a half a piece of bread, the sharing of a beautiful story, whatever it was, they could take in this moment and live it fully. And if you can do that under those conditions, I can't think of any job in the world in which you can't change your attitude toward it and make it work for you. And once you do that, by the way, your chances of being promoted and getting out of there and doing other things are greater. That's A. Or B, if you've tried that and you still don't have that sense of purpose that is so important, then take the risk. Take the risk. Change it. Leave it. You're not going to abdicate your responsibilities. If you've been a person who's been responsible all of your life, you're not going to suddenly turn around and become a bum of some kind and not fulfill your responsibilities. You'll find, Mark Twain once said, I'm an old man, and I've had many troubles, most of which have never happened. Most of the things that you envision that are going to be terrible, all the disasters that you think are going to befall you as a result of taking that risk and taking that chance, they're all in your head. When you get out there and do it, you try the new job, you get out of that relationship, or you go to work at improving it. You move on to another part of the country or another part of the world that is something you've always wanted to do, and you do it. And you get out there and you struggle and you try it. You may not even make as much money. Chances are you will, probably more. Most people find out that they are doing even better when they have more of a sense of personal mission about themselves. But whatever it is, there's no price tag you can put on how you feel each day when you're doing something that is important to you. A very good example of that is Jess Lair, who has written books I'm sure that many of you have read. I Ain't Perfect, or whatever it is. I may not be well, but pretty soon I'm going to get things under control, or whatever the hell its titles are. Had a heart attack. He was working as an executive and so on, had a heart and came close to dying, and decided that he'd always wanted to go out into Montana. He'd always wanted to raise horses. And he did it. He just took the risk and went out there, and he wanted to write, and he started writing. And before long, he was doing 100% better than he had ever done before. The person you are looking at right now, is a classic example of that. I was a college professor. I was working as a therapist in New York. I was doing a lot of workshops and things like that. But the idea of going into work and working for somebody else every day of my life just didn't give me the sense of purpose that I felt I wanted. And I was able to take a tenured position at a major university as a professor and say, I don't want that. I'm going to go out and I'm going to write and I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to go on television. I'm going to make this thing happen. And those of you who knew me long before, I became famous and so on, know that that was something I announced to everyone, to all of my classes and so on. I'm going to go out there and make it happen. And every publisher and everybody in the field who told me what the world needs least of all right now is another self-help book, and we certainly don't need another psychologist telling us how to live, and all of those things, couldn't have cared less. And when they told me I couldn't get on the network television because I was an unknown, I said, fine, then I'll go on a little 5-watt station in WBAB in Babylon, New York. And that's where I did my very first interview and went to little cities. They wouldn't let me here in Detroit do interviews, so I went to Toledo, and I went to Columbus, and I went to places where I could just get on a radio station and talk all night. And when they said, you're not going to have books in those cities, I said, that's no problem, I'll take them with me. When they said, we're not going to do a second printing, I said, send me the whole first printing, 1,500 books. Ask my wife. They were all delivered right to our garage one day, 1,500 books. And they said, well, we're not going to do a second printing. I said, well, you don't have any first printing. It's all sold out. I bought them. Which is exactly what I did. True story. It was a matter of never once in my life wavering from the idea. And I borrowed money to buy those books. I didn't have a whole lot of money. I would do anything to go out there and make it happen. When we went into a place in Columbus, Ohio, telling this is really interesting. This is on television forever. I would go on a radio show and give a talk and talk for 2 hours. And people would say, where can we get your book? I had a list. My wife had already gotten a list of where all the bookstores were in that city. And I announced. I said, you can get them at the Bookmark bookstore over here and this bookstore over there. And pretty soon they were getting phone calls for the books. And they didn't have the books, of course. They weren't there. It wasn't even a known book at that time. Then I would arrive there with my little truck and my books. And they said, my God, we've had 14 requests for that book already. Where is it? I said, well, do you want me to leave you a couple of cases of them? And then if you don't sell them, you can send them. Why, sure. They had them all sold out. I became my own distributor. In other words, did that all across the country. And when September came along, after doing a couple of thousand of interviews, all-night interviews, driving between cities, going out there and spending money that I didn't even have, finally, The Tonight Show, after hundreds and hundreds of efforts, called me, said, we'd like to have you come on. And you know what everybody said? Boy, were you lucky. You hit it just at the right time, Things just worked out for you. And they don't understand that anyone that you ever know, Adolph Rupp said this, the old basketball coach at the University of Kentucky, that anyone you ever meet who's at the top didn't just land there. They worked and worked and struggled to get there. And don't take, by the way, that very same concept of what it means to struggle and deny it to your own children. So many parents I know who can remember earning their own nickels and dimes and quarters, shoveling snow, you remember, Mother, fighting over who was going to get the snow shovel, and going out and hustling jobs, trying to cut grass and so on. A lot of us can remember earning our own nickels, dimes, and quarters, and have children who expect to drive sports cars, or want $200 fry boots, or expect to have baton twirling lessons and Mama pick them up and take them everywhere. And the old notion of you give a man a fish and he eats for a day, you teach a man to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime, has a whole lot of truth for me in it. Don't deny your children the very thing that made you the successful person that you are. Let them have some struggles. Let them be allowed to go out and work it. I often tell facetiously, for those of you who sell life insurance, that I don't have life insurance, because when I die, I want it to be a real tragedy,
What is the key to developing a good, positive self-image?
The key to a positive self-image, it seems to me, is self-confidence. And self-confidence is something that doesn't happen to you. A lot of people get confidence all mixed up. They say things like this to themselves. I want to be a dancer. I want to be a writer. I want to be an actor. I want to, whatever it may be. I want to be an executive. And they say, I want to dance. I just want to get out there and I want to be a dancer. I said, well, why don't you go out there and dance? Get out there and do it a lot. And audition for every show that comes along and dance, take lessons from all of the top dancers. No, I don't have any confidence. As soon as my confidence is increased, then I'm going to be a great dancer. They get it all mixed up. You see, the only way you get confidence to be a great anything is by first going out and doing it, and doing it, and doing it again and again and again. And after a while, you begin to... Confidence comes from behavior. Confidence comes from risk-taking, from not worrying about failing, from not being so consumed about whether somebody else is going to laugh at you, not being afraid to fall down. The difference between a neurotic and a no-limit person are both of them are climbing a hill together, you see. And there's a big patch of ice that neither one of them expected, and they both fall down. The neurotic stays there, whines, complains, says there's not supposed to be ice in April. They promised us this on our itinerary, there'd be no ice. It's not fair. Look I cut my new clothes. That's not right. You see, and they complain about it. Whereas the no-limit person just gets up and kind of dusts himself off and says, watch out for the ice, and keeps right on moving. They allow failures to be something that mobilize them, whereas people without self-esteem or self-confidence allow failures to immobilize them. They go out and they try something, and they're not successful at it. They're 12 years old, and they walk in and they say, I would like to be principal of this school, or I would like to be the president of the National Bank of Detroit, Well, we don't need any 12-year-old presidents. See, I told you I couldn't be anything. That's the kind of attitude that they have. Whereas the fully functioning person goes, well, if I can't be president here, maybe I could sweep floors in a bank in Toledo or whatever, and uses their rejections and their failures to go on and try other things. The essence, it seems to me, of achieving self-confidence is doing. I hear, I forget. I see, I remember. I do, and I understand. And not one moment before. If you don't have self-esteem, if you don't have self-confidence in yourself, get up off of your rear end and do anything that will make you feel a little bit better about yourself, and then do it again, and do it again, and before long, you'll be a person who has confidence. Tracy and I, before coming out here, she was looking out there and saying, 3,000 people? You want me to walk out there? 3,000? And it's like, and I was telling her, I said, I remember the very first time that I had to give a book report in school, what I felt like the night before, knowing the kind of friends I had who were pointing to you like your fly was open and all of the other things that they do. And how frightened I was and saying, please, maybe the teacher will have a stroke, and she'll lose her memory and won't remember there's a Wayne Dyer in the class. Anything, hoping for anything, so I didn't have to get up there. And I said, how do you get to a point where you can walk out in front of thousands of people and talk? It didn't just happen. That was a frightful experience. You do it once, you do it again, and before long, it becomes something that is easy and fun and exciting for you. And the other part of that self-confidence is that you don't equate your image of yourself as a human being with how well you do things in life. You are not what you do. If you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't, right? You don't exist. If you are your business, if you are how much money you make, if you are your home, if you are your family, if you are your children, if that's what you are, and those things go away, and they always do. They always do. Life is very transitory. If you lose your job, and you will, somebody along there's going to come along and take it from you. That's the nature of the way it works. If that means your self-image is tied up with that, then when your job goes, when that promotion doesn't come, when the house goes, when the children leave, when your spouse dies, whatever it may be, then you die a little bit too. But if you are what you believe you are, and if you allow yourself to fail at some things and do well at other things, and to take risks and so on, and you don't confuse your worth as a human being with what you do in life. You see what you do in life as choices. But you never, ever compromise on this one choice. You are always a valuable, worthwhile human being, not because anybody else says so, not because you're successful, not because you make a lot of money, but because you decide to believe it and for no other reason. If you don't understand that, you won't have a handle on being a no-limit person.
This has been a presentation of Simon & Schuster Audio.